patterns that we still use today. Hi everyone, it's interior designer Carol Gilman. Let's discover interior design. In this video, we are going to be talking about the herringbone and chevron patterns. Both of these patterns I think of as zigzag type of patterns because they change direction, and because of that they create a lot of movement and in a way kind of add kind of geometric or modern look to our homes. Both of them have been around many hundreds of years. In fact, even the Romans created the herringbone pattern for the layout of bricks in roads. In today's home, we are drawn to these patterns because they are dynamic. They create a sense of movement just because of the lines and how those patterns are laid out. This video, we are going to focus on the flooring and wall applications for these patterns. But of course, these patterns are used on fabrics and wallpaper and all sorts of things that we use in our homes. While there are similarities to both of these patterns because they both kind of create this sense of movement just because of that zigzag change of direction of different pieces that are in that pattern, there are some differences. When we take a look at a herringbone pattern, that pattern is starting out with a rectangular piece, whether that's a piece of wood or a tile or some other material. When someone is installing, say, a herringbone floor or even a herringbone style of pattern of tile on a wall, lots of times they will need to start with a central access line to get everything lined up. To create this pattern, you start with a rectangular piece and place it at 45-degree angle on that central access line. Then the other piece is lined up along the shorter end of that first piece. And then you just continue on alternating those pieces until you create this overall pattern, which was named herringbone because it resembled the bone structure of a herring fish. And then with the chevron pattern, you're starting out with a rectangular piece, again, whether that is a piece of wood or a tile or some other type of material. But each end is cut at a 45-degree angle instead of a 90-degree angle in comparison to the herringbone pattern pieces. And you start out the same way. You want to find a central access line. And to create this pattern, you would just start placing one rectangular piece, then place the other rectangular piece, which is a mirror image of that rectangular piece on the other side, to where those ends meet up to create a point. Another example of where this type of application is used is if we look at a picture frame, and lots of times picture frames have a 45-degree angle cut in the corners, and that's where the two pieces meet. So with the chevron pattern, you just continue placing one piece after another, and when that's completed, you can see that there's this definite almost V-shaped pattern happening. In today's homes, we use those patterns, whether it's in flooring or on walls, say in tile applications. And those patterns take a lot of time to install correctly. And I always recommend working with someone who is an expert at installing this type of pattern because it really does need to be precise and needs to be thought out really well. But if you are a do-it-yourselfer and you want to lay out your floors or lay out the tile on your wall in one of these patterns, I'll leave links to channels that guide you through that process. If we were going to use one of these patterns with wood flooring, We can also think about what's called parquet flooring, which just means that pieces of wood are placed together to form a pattern. And both the chevron and herringbone patterns are one of those types of patterns that we can refer to as a parquet type of flooring or pattern. When you go out to look for wood flooring to create a chevron or a herringbone pattern, you can find it pre-cut to create these patterns. And even these patterns are available in other materials such as vinyl. And you can also purchase planks or strips of wood from a flooring retailer or manufacturer who can help to install it or even help to pre-cut it to create one of those patterns. And when you want to place one of these patterns on your walls, we can think of that pattern as in tile applications. And many times we can find these patterns already kind of started for us because the tile manufacturer will create pre-made sheets of these patterns on a mesh sort of material. They will place what they call mosaic pieces on there, meaning that there are different pieces of tile placed on that mesh in that chevron or in that herringbone pattern already. So that saves time because lots of times those tile pieces are smaller. And so making a mesh sheet with a grouping of that pattern already is really helpful when you are, say, putting that on your bathroom wall or on the backsplash in your kitchen. And we can also use wood placed in one of those patterns that will create a really cool dynamic look to a feature wall. And I'd love to hear from you if you have one of these patterns in your home and where you decided to use it and which pattern you chose. Thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Take care.